I'm Mike Sibley, leader of the James Miller manufacturing team. I'm here with Kevin Golden, one of my partners, and also a member of the James Miller manufacturing team. Today, we are joined by Steve Blue, CEO of Miller Ingenuity. Miller Ingenuity creates high technology products that save lives while preserving the environment. Steve is also the CEO in residence at Winona State University and author of 5 best-selling books, including Mastering the Art of Success, The $10 Million Employee, and Metamorphosis. Steve is a keynote speaker addressing audiences at Harvard Business School, the United Nations, Carnegie Hall, and Medtronic Corporation, to just name a few. So we're real lucky to have Steve on today to discuss. We're going to talk about leadership and what he refers to as ambidextrous leadership. So being a business owner is really hard. Being in leadership is really hard. As companies grow, business owners find themselves evolving from working in the business to working that they need to work on the business. And that's a tough transition. And I think building management teams and building teams that can support that leadership. And it requires owners to juggle short-term earnings with long-term results while also trying to satisfy employees, which can be difficult, not to mention customers, board members, and other stakeholders. So again, this is what requires a bit of what Steve calls ambidextrous leadership. So we're going to talk about that and Steve's tips for becoming more like an ambidextrous leader. And why leadership is not a binary choice and the importance of communication. So Steve, welcome to the show. We're really grateful to have you on and really interested to hear more of your perspective and how businesses can use this to not only make themselves better, but as we kind of talked about before, produce more value for the company.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, guys. Unfortunately, Mike, you just took all my talking points.
Yeah, I'm sure you can dig in a lot. I'm sure you can dig in a lot deeper and really bring some more insights.
Well, and Steve, first of all, thanks for coming on. You got quite a experience there, and we love having people like yourself talk with us. But when I was reading through and kind of reading over some points and all things you've talked about, this idea of ambidextrous leadership, I've never really heard it kind of put that way, right? Kind of explained that way. So could you tell us or tell our listeners and all, first of all, what is ambidextrous leadership and how is it different than probably what people generally think of leadership when they hear that word in a business setting or otherwise? And then more importantly, why is it important and valuable to a business owner? What value is that bringing to the table?
Well, I have to tell you that ambidextrous leader is a media made up term. The media loves to make up terms, right? The one that they've been using lately, quiet quitting.
Yep. Right.
We used to call that retiring in place.
Yes.
It's quiet quitting, and they try to make it sound like it's a new phenomenon, which is not. Ambidextrous, the classical definition of ambidextrous is I can write with my left hand and I can write with my right hand, and I'm just as good either way. Okay, I get that. But ambidextrous leadership, in my view, is as you mentioned, Mike. Leadership is not a binary choice. You don't get to go 0 or 1. You have to go 0 and 1. And the trick and the key in ambidextrous leadership is you have to know which button you're going to push at any given day. And it varies from day to day. Wouldn't it be nice if, and you guys are in manufacturing, wouldn't it be nice if we could just sit back and go, everything's running good. Don't have to do a thing. One play golf and life is great.
Right.
And I'll tell you, every time, and I've been in leadership for about 45 years. And every time I sat back and thought, I got it made now, I got the CEO thing down, something went horribly wrong. And why was that? Because I wasn't watching the business like a hawk. And an ambidextrous leader, as you mentioned, Mike, has to balance short-term earnings with long-term results. That ain't easy. I'm sorry, guys. That's the job of a CEO, like it or don't like it, but that is the job of a CEO. You got to satisfy the board, the shareholders, the employees, the customers, the activists, and maybe I missed a few or two there. And so you look at the customers, and all they want is lower price, lower it again, lower it again, lower it again, and they'll squeeze you until there's nothing left to squeeze. And so that's what they want, right? And they want delivery immediately. They want highest possible quality and all that. Then you look inside the organization, then those are impossible demands. So just to use that as an example, you have to balance those two constituencies. And a lot of that ends up being actions you take, but a lot of that ends up being how you communicate expectations and how you communicate what is happening inside the business and what needs to happen and so forth. So it's kind of a juggling, balancing act, and it's and the shareholders, by the way, always want more. They want more. They want more. They want. I'm not saying it's bad. It just is fine.
Right.
And so they don't want you to invest in the business. I've never seen a shareholder yet that really. Well, I'm sure you guys have. I haven't seen a shareholder yet that would say, "I don't want dividends. I want you to reinvest it in the business."
Mhm.
They must exist out there somewhere, but
I think there's a few. Yeah, I think there's a few.
yeah, but I haven't run into them yet. And the shareholders tend to be kind of blind to, well, let's say in 2 years, because I didn't make an investment in the business that should have been made, the company goes belly up. You think they're going to blame themselves? You think your board is going to go, oh, yeah, right. I know you wanted to invest. We told you no because we needed earnings and dividends and all that kind of stuff. They won't blame themselves. So you have to juggle. It's a juggling act between all those constituencies.
Was there a point, Steve, where, you mentioned 45 years in leadership? Was there sort of a turning point where all of a sudden you realized, you've got to look at things a little different. You've got to look at these balances. You've got to communicate with people. So what was that kind of point all of a sudden that made you change as a leader?
That's a good question, Mike. That point happened when I was in a turnaround. And this was, I don't know, 30 years ago, something like that, 31 years ago. And it was the most awful experience. I was an executive, but I wasn't at the top. I wasn't the CEO. I was one level down. And this guy, because the world of today was so ugly, we were bleeding red ink all over the place. He didn't want to live in that world. So he spent enormous amounts of time and energy and money on strategic planning. Are you kidding me? There were sometimes we have to make a choice between paying payroll or keeping the lights on, and waste. So one of the things I learned in that situation was cash is king. Cash is everything, and you've got to watch the numbers like a hawk every single day. I look at my order intake every single day, even now. But I learned that in the turnaround because I was up close and personal with a company that went belly up, and they shouldn't have, because they weren't paying attention to the right things. And so that's when I learned business is a contact sport. It's up close and personal. It's not academic. It's not what you read in the Harvard Business Review, really. I mean, for some companies, maybe it is. And it's kind of a ground game. That was the turning point.
Yeah, it sounds like to me, Steve, you're saying that way to sum that up is leadership's not stagnant. Right. I remember one of my mentors, me coming up in accounting and so forth. I remember one of the up and coming, senior managers who made it to a partner level. And I think he from his quote was the day that he made partner, one of the more senior partners, founders of the company, looked at him and said, "Congratulations, welcome to the starting line." And you're thinking, oh, man, I've climbed so for years. I've done all this and all. But like you just said, there is no point where you've just made it. No. And you're just there, and now you're on autopilot, and things are just coming, and and they run smoothly. Like you said, it's not stagnant. There are things you always have to be looking at, and like you said, not binary 0 and 1, not one or the other, and not one size fits all either for what solution is working now.
Yep.
In the near future, it may be completely different, but it's looking at all those aspects and balancing them. So.
That's right. I'm better than most at planning. Mm-hmm. I'm always looking at, it's my job to look ahead a number of years, right? Now, don't look ahead 5 years. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. You don't either. Nobody else does. So you sort of place your bets and make your best guesses. So I'm pretty good at looking into the future. But even as good as I am, I kind of go from one crisis to another. And the crises end up happening at some odd occurrence about once a year. I don't know what they are. Okay, it was a pandemic. I didn't know that was coming. Nobody else did. And that was one. And recessions are a crisis that are predicted. I mean, we know we're going to be in a recession. We just don't know sort of when. One time I had my chief financial officer just walk off the job one day, decided he just didn't want it anymore, and just left, no notice, no warning, no nothing. And so it's just sort of those things you can't predict and you can't know in advance. So you have to be kind of prepared for everything. And I get asked a lot, what does that mean? I said all the time, I said, I'll tell you what it means. Make sure your balance sheet is very, very strong. Strong balance sheet, you can withstand almost anything. If you're leveraged to the hilt, you can't withstand hardly anything. And my advice is always to say, make sure your balance sheet is really, really strong.
So, when you're talking about a lot of tough decisions and a lot of tough, I guess going back to, leadership is not a binary choice. So it's not black or white. There's a lot of different options there. What do you suggest for up and coming leaders, up and coming CEOs when it comes to these tough decisions and dealing with them? How do you approach that? Because like you said, there's always a crisis at some point. There's always something. There's an employee issue. There's something going on. How do you suggest these, the younger leaders and up and coming leaders to approach those situations?
Well, for one thing, I would say if you have an opportunity, get into turnaround, because you'll learn more from a turnaround than you will from Harvard. And the other thing I would say is you have to look at issues, opportunities and issues, what you guys would call 360 degrees, right? From every angle. Get every opinion you can about it. I have a consulting industrial psychologist that I call upon often. I, of course, will converse with my board when I need to, because at the end of the day, you need to make sure you've got their input. And I can converse with my employees. I get as many diverse views as I can, because every decision you make as a leader, certainly as a CEO, affects almost all your constituents. Right. The little ones, maybe not so much, but the big ones, if you're going to have a layoff, as an example, or restructure the company, boy, that's just devastating for the people that are going to be affected by that. And you have to take all that into account. At the end of the day, layoffs a good example. I hate doing layoffs. I've only ever done one. I had to, didn't want to. I didn't do any in the pandemic, by the way. I just didn't happen to think the shareholders needed to get a little more wealthy during the pandemic at the expense of people's mortgages. And we didn't lose any money. We were making really good money, just not as good as we did before. And if you're going to make a dramatic action in the business, just make sure you understand down and personal how that affects people. But having said that, at the end of the day, I get paid to increase shareholder wealth. That's what I get paid. That's what every CEO gets paid to do. And I don't get paid to, this will sound cold, I don't get paid to look after people's mortgages. I don't get paid to make sure they're happy. I don't get paid for any of that stuff. I get paid to increase, as you said earlier, shareholder value.
Right. Well, I mean, the purpose of business is to make a profit, right? Unless they're a nonprofit organization, and even a nonprofit can't run out of money. So that they've got to be doing things. So, a for-profit business, the goal of the business is to make money. And
it's always to make more money than you did before.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of, what have you done for me lately, right? What you did yesterday was great. Now what are you doing?
That's exactly what it is. And that sucks, right? That's like life, I've had people who work for me who would say, God, the board was not happy that you didn't make more than you did last year. Ain't that a shame? I said, yeah, ain't a shame. Move on. Let's move on.
Yeah. You only get to celebrate for about a minute, and then okay, right. What's next?
Right. I'll tell you one thing that about that dynamic, and I'm a big guy, so I've got thick skin. So if you say you're disappointed that I didn't do better than a record year, okay, that's not going to hurt my feeling. But I've had people tell sales execs who have had record years, and they put the squeeze on. GE was notorious for this. Then they put the squeeze on them. You must do better this year than you did in the record year. And then they punish them when they don't. And then they're surprised when they never have another record year.
Yeah.
Why would the sales guy turn in another record year if he's going to get punched out for not repeating it?
Yeah.
So how do you communicate with your employees?
Yeah.
You have a record year, and obviously the expectations are high, and maybe you have the next year and it's a good year, but it's not as good as a record year. How do you communicate with them to say, hey, great job, let's keep it going? Or what's your approach in dealing with employees in that situation?
It's an interesting dynamic with employees. If you don't treat them well, if you don't compensate them properly, and if you don't communicate with them well, they could care less what the company's doing. You haven't earned the right for them to care less if you're not doing those three things. And I'll give you an example. In our company, we have one metric, only one metric. Now, we pay market rates for everybody here, but there's only one metric for getting, I don't like to call them bonuses because it's something you earn, an incentive award, let's put it that way. And that is the performance to the operating budget. If we hit the operating budget, everybody gets the goodies, and everybody knows what the goodies will be for them. If we don't hit and that includes me, if we don't hit the operating budget, nobody gets the goodies, including me. And you would be, and so that eliminates all this infighting between departments. Now, departments will infight. That's just the nature of the beast. Sales is always going to think manufacturing is not shipping out fast enough. Manufacturing is always going to think sales is nothing but a bunch of womenizing boozers, and that's just the way it is, right? But when it comes to, if you take your typical manufacturing guy, they think they get paid to put things out the back door, whether they work or not, whether they're high quality or not. And because they're compensated in most companies for that. They're compensated on shipments attained, right? I knew a guy once who, I wasn't the CEO, I was a peer of his. He'd ship out a product and like 20 or 30 trailers on the 29th or the 30th of the month that hadn't been sold. They had not been sold. So he would get his comp for the month, right? And then on the first or the second, he'd bring them all right back in again. Well, that's because he was getting paid on shipments. So I'll be a little facetious with you here, guys, but not much. So the manufacturing guy thinks his job is shove everything out the back door no matter what. The quality guy thinks his job is to don't ever let anything get out the back door, because then you can't have a quality defect. And so I eliminate all that when they're all he's not compensated on shipments. The quality guy's not compensated on. If you don't have quality, if you don't have shipments, you won't make the operating income budget. And so everybody moves along to the same tune. And I'll give an example. A couple of years ago, I was walking to the factory. We're on a calendar year.
Right.
And a guy from the factory came up to me. We're in danger of not making the year. And he said, I'm really worried. This is a factory guy. I'm really worried that we might not make our operating profit budget. What can I do? Where do you hear that out of people in the factory who normally don't really give a hoot?
Right.
Yeah.
So that must mean that the level of transparency for your employees is pretty high. So in other words, you share quite a bit of financial related information with the employees, which I'm a big fan of, but not a lot of there are a lot of companies that are not. And so what's your view on that level of transparency? Then?
I understand, I understand the dynamics. If you tell them, you don't tell them, you tell them, you treat, if you treat people like children, they'll act like children. So I choose to treat them like adults. And there are some things, of course, that I can't reveal. And every company can't, public companies less so. I believe we'll tell them every month, here's exactly where we are to the operating income budget. And so you run into some issues when you're that transparent, because as an example, they'll go, well, we're 140% ahead of budget in July. We can take our feet off the gas, right? No, right? We don't know what's going to happen in August and September. So you have to be sort of on an education quest when you're that transparent. And when you are that transparent, people will trust you more because you're transparent. They don't, if you're not transparent and you play everything close to the chest, then they never know what to believe.
Right.
If you say the sky's falling, they go, yeah, well, maybe, I don't know. Who knows? Right? He sort of plays it close to his chest. Or if you say, we have an issue coming up, it could be a serious one. It could cause problems for the company. Here's what we need to do about it. They take it seriously. They don't assume that you're sort of making it up. So I found that transparency in financials just drives performance that's far and away superior than not doing it.
Well, and like you said, some of that transparency and the communication, because that was going to be my question too, Mike, was about communication. That's so vital. Kind of, I guess, from that standpoint, the real value there is it's linking up what may be otherwise competing interests and so forth to naturally help people make the right decision, whether you're the shipping guy, you're the quality control. naturally saying, hey, I'm going to make what the right decision is, given my role that I can control, because we all have the same vision of got to add to that operational profit. So
Right.
that way we all go home happy at the end of the day or at the end of the year.
That's right. It's decisions get made because they're the right ones, because everybody knows what the right ones are. Because,
Right.
Micromanaging is a really bad idea. There's still plenty of micromanagers out there, I suppose. I don't know. I'm not one of them, never have been. And if you think that you can control anything, including individual employee actions in any size corporation, you're deluding yourself. You can't. You cannot control anything but what you do. So what you do is the situation you create is it's self-controlling.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, my factory is all self-directed. There's no boss out there that tells anybody what to do. They walk in the morning, they get on the computer, they get into the system, what has to be built today, what's been ordered, what needs to ship today, and then they go build it, and then they ship it. And so parts of my factory don't even work on a given day because there were no orders. And I don't have people like standing around waiting for it. But anyway, they don't have anybody telling them what to do. They do it all by themselves. But you got to be careful in a self-directed workforce. It sounds great, doesn't it? Oh, yeah,
Oh,
man,
yeah.
we have some of that. I want to be self-directed. Yeah.
What could go wrong, right?
Right. So you have to be careful who you hire, because
Right.
Some people like to check their brains at the door.
Right.
That's not what we want. And so we screen for that before we ever hire them. And you'd be amazed when we first started transferring to self-directed workforce, there were a lot of people that just didn't want any part of that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
goodbye, because this is what we're going to be, and this is what we got to have. No offense, nothing against you if that's not your thing, because you take somebody that's had decades of being told exactly what to do and liking it, you can't change that person.
Right.
So
Right.
I want to dig into that thought a little bit more, because one of the things with the, businesses we come across often is you've got a CEO, an owner who's been very, very successful in building a business, but back to that micromanagement, they're very involved in every aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Most decisions have to go through them. It's very difficult to get anything done unless it goes through them. How do you advise, or how do you suggest that CEOs and leaders move that away? In other words, transform themselves away from the micromanaging, hands-on, all decisions go through, to allowing other leaders and managers and other people to make those decisions and help the business run?
Well, that's a good question. and most big core, you guys know this, big companies have layers and layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy. Why is that? Primarily so not one person can screw the whole place up.
Right.
It's not possible, right? And then everybody's covering their butt all the way up, and you know how that stuff goes. And so the other reason that kind of control is used is because of ego. Because the CEO thinks nobody knows better than I do, nobody's smarter than I am, and therefore I must make all of the decisions. You can't change somebody like that. Oh, if they're just getting out of B school, they're not teaching them that anymore. But somebody who's like, I don't know, in their 50s, say, or 60s, it's been like that. It's hard to let go when you think that you're the only one that can make the thing turn out all right. So I don't have a lot of good advice on that, Mike.
I'll say, Steve, in those situations, then, I mean, is it just I've seen sometimes it's hey, we've got to wait till the next, the sibling, the child or somebody in the next that's in line and take that over, to then say, well, here's an opportunity we have because someone's in their 30s and 40s, not in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, with that thought process, that mind change, some of that. Is that just a one person to another, a generation, if you will? Sometimes is it kind of those changes? Is that kind of your only resort in those cases?
I think so. It's a baby boomer thing, right? They're all retiring now in droves, but the baby boomers grew up in the command and control world, and that's what they were taught. And that's what they were teaching in the B schools, and that's what they were expected to do. So they did. I was fortunate. My first industrial job when I was, 23, 24, was with a company called Allen Bradley. They're an industrial equipment manufacturer, a pretty big one. They're now actually Rockwell, because Rockwell bought them years ago. And they had a world class. When I was there, it was $1 billion company. It wasn't small. When I was there, I had the benefit of world class leadership training because they knew how to treat people. They knew how to get the best out of people. And I'll give you an example. Harry Bradley, they have a big factory and it's still there in downtown Milwaukee. I don't know, 20, 30 stories high. And Harry Bradley lived at the very top. He had an apartment up there. At that point in time, he owned all the shares. He walked the factory on the third shift, not to see if people were working, but to make sure that they were being treated well by their supervisors. And so I had the benefit early on, even though I'm a baby boomer, I had the benefit early on of getting, and Alan Bradley just really realized that the most productive way is by treating people well. Now, that doesn't mean you let them get away with murder.
Sure.
But it means that you treat people as though that you'd want to be treated if you were there.
Right. Right.
So along those lines, how did you learn to, as you've allowed people to make decisions and to be more responsible, they're going to make mistakes sometimes.
Sure.
And how do you message that? How do you communicate that? And then how do you ultimately handle that situation so you can help them improve and help so there's no big detrimental decisions being made to the business?
Yeah, the executives that report to me can make big mistakes. I mean, really big mistakes. Now we all have what do we call it? The limits of authority.
Right.
So that does limit the mistakes but they probably make more mistakes than I know of, and I don't care. The point is, first of all, if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing enough. I mean, that's just a fact. And the important thing is, do they learn from their mistakes? Now, these guys are involved in a lot of things I've never done before. Okay, I've been in sales, I've been in marketing, I've never been in engineering, right? I'm not an engineer, I'm basically a marketeer at heart. And so some of the mistakes that they make, I wouldn't even know what they are.
Right.
I know what the result would be, the outcome, if it's a really big mistake. And that does happen periodically. Now I've got these guys been working for me for 15 or 20 years. So I know them well. We have a business review meeting once a month, everything top to bottom, price, new development, you name it. And so I get a kind of a glimpse into what they're doing. But other than that, once you trust people and once you've given them what they need to do their job, all you got to do is get out of the way. Let them do it.
Sure. Joe, I want to go back to a comment you made earlier about sometimes you can get some departments butting heads against each other, but all working all rowing the same direction. Hopefully, how do you overcome, or how do you get the departments, or do the departments hold each other accountable if they see one slipping and not pulling their weight towards whatever strategic actions you guys have for that particular period of time, knowing that it's affecting your budget? How do you deal with those dynamics across departments?
Well, they do know how they do challenge each other, and because again, everyone's working for operating income. No one's working on turf. No one's working on I was right and you were wrong. None of that. I'm sure it occurs to some degree. I mean, they're humans. We're people here.
Sure.
I was asked the other day, does sales and operations get along? I said, no, they're not supposed to. This isn't a love fest. There's an inherent conflict between sales and operations, and it exists here, but it's at the noise level. If it rises to above noise level, it starts affecting the numbers. And if that happens, then I get involved. It very seldom happens here.
Right.
But I don't try to micromanage. Okay, I know you hurt your feelings when you said this, and right, I'm not your mother, right? So just kind of get over it, and people know that's kind of what and besides that, I'm not very good at detail. If I tried to micromanage these guys, I would screw it up.
So again, you just don't, you treat them like adults, not like children.
Right. If you treat people like you don't trust them, they'll be untrustworthy.
Right.
If you treat them like you trust them, they'll be trustworthy.
Right. Well, it sounds like, you've built a culture that allows people to have candid, positive dialogue to improve the business at the end of the day.
Yep. That's the key. Yeah, it's, if you got something on your mind, tell me about it.
Right.
Unfortunately, in many organizations, I wouldn't say most because I wouldn't know. Many organizations, you're not allowed to criticize the boss. You're not allowed, oh boy, don't criticize sales because everything starts with the order. Don't forget that.
Right.
And that's just very, very dysfunctional. And so if you have open and honest communication, it's a lot better situation. I'll give you an example. Whenever I'm communicating something nobody wants to do, now you guys don't like change. I can guarantee you don't like change unless you're the person initiating the change, right?
Right.
If
Right.
it's being done to you, nobody likes that. But every time I've initiated a change, and I've done quite a bit of it here, if it's a big change, I have to convince the board, I have to convince the employees, I have to convince the customers. And my formula has always been don't just talk about all the good things that'll happen if we do this, because people are generally not drawn toward good things. They're drawn away from bad things. The repellent of a bad event is stronger than the attraction of a potentially good one. So I always paint both sides of the picture. Here's what all the good stuff that'll happen to us when we do this, and here's all of the bad stuff that'll happen if we don't. And to me, that's proven to be a very effective formula in convincing people to go along with the change program.
Yeah. So we're we're getting close to time on here. This has been a fantastic conversation. I am curious as you go through this and you have people in your organization that are challenging each other in a professional way. But and I know you talk about this a little bit in one of your books, but every once in a while you get that one employee who becomes really problematic and disruptive. And sometimes that employee can be very technically talented in whatever the area they're in and can produce a lot of value, but on the other hand, can be very disruptive. And how do you deal with that? You got high value, but at the other hand, low value and disruption.
You got to get rid of them. I wrote a piece a couple of years ago entitled "Don't Let Bill O'Reilly's Ruin Your Company." I have nothing against Bill O'Reilly, right? But he was a wrecking ball inside the network, and eventually it caught up to him, and they figured out, the destruction he was creating and the chaos was not worth the output that he gave. And so when you get somebody like sales are notorious for this. Sales guys can act like the completest jackasses on the planet if they're bringing in the bacon, right? You know that.
Right.
But the downstream effect of somebody who is detrimental to the organization, you try to counsel them, but people like that generally aren't counselable. Let's put it that way. And if that doesn't work, then you've made a statement. Because if you say, in my company, my philosophy is everybody is treated well, and this guy's treating everybody like I won't say what. If you let them stay, they look around, they go, yeah. It's like I wrote a piece about United Airlines and their bumper sticker values. They used to have, values on their wall, values in the boardroom, values in the annual report that says we love our customers. They do not love their customers. Everybody knows they don't love their customers, but many companies have bumper sticker values. And so the first time you let anybody violate that value system, then people don't believe any of it.
Right.
Great point. Steve, as we kind of wrap this up here, we've hit a lot of different topics, probably some we weren't even planning on. Do you have any final words or advice for up and coming leaders, to think about and things that can help as we kind of wrap up here?
I do. Become a problem solver and a troubleshooter.
Yeah.
When I was with Allen Bradley, I built a career in that company by going and taking all the crap jobs that nobody else wanted and fixing it. And so first I'd ask for the crap jobs, right? And then general managers would say, I want Blue to come here and fix this. And so take all the assignments that nobody wants. And as I did that over the course of a number of years, I started learning all about marketing, all about engineering, all about accounting, not all about accounting, but enough about accounting. And so you build a career by becoming at the end of the day, everybody wants a troubleshooter.
Yeah.
So become one.
I like how you put that, Steve. The way I've phrased that in the past, people is becoming sticky. You do all these things and so forth. You become sticky. You learn a lot. You become very sticky. And then also, like you said, it's I think some of the takeaways I have from there is, I love it that you said a problem solver. I've often said you don't have to know the answer. You don't have to solve the problems. Most great leaders understand they don't know the answer, the solution, but they'll figure out a way to get there, right? And that's usually through the use of others. So I love, again, bringing it back to that whole ambidextrous leadership. Okay, I've got to know what I don't know, and know that I've got to surround my people with great people from top to bottom that'll help me get there, to help me problem solve. And then I've got to listen and let them do their thing.
Yep.
Give them that freedom, if you will, while at the same time making sure they're all rowing in the right direction. So.
I tell people all the time, I'm not that smart, but I've been around a long time. After 45 years in every kind of imaginable organization you can think of, there really is very little, if anything, I haven't seen.
Right. Well,
all right. Well, Steve, thank you so much. We appreciate you being on the show today. This is really great information, and as always, we thank you for being on. We appreciate those listening in, and I would suggest anybody to look Steve up in his books and his writings. It's very interesting information. It's good leadership information. It's a wealth of experience. So thank you for sharing a little bit of that with us today.
My pleasure.
All right. Thanks again for everybody listening, and hope you all have a great day.
To learn more about James Moore & Company's manufacturing services, go to jmco.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our More on Manufacturing series to receive updates when new videos and podcasts are released. If you'd like to be a guest, or if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on a future episode, contact us on our website. You can also follow us on social media for more news as the landscape on manufacturing continues to rapidly evolve.